Grappers.
I'm so familiar with that.
Teresa, looks like the recording started.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. It is, today's date is Monday, March the 10th, and it's now 2:07 p.m. We'll start with the land acknowledgement, which I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. We are here to do the work of the Civil Service Commission, whose responsibility is to ensure that Seattle City workforce reflects the shared values of this community, respect for the indigenous people, and committed to holding each other accountable. Next order of business is introductions. I begin with myself. My name is Ray Caesar, Commissioner and President, and Chair, I'm sorry.
Denise Wells, Commissioner. Mary Wyman Williams, Commissioner.
We did not have any public comment.
No
in
public
writing.
comment.
Yeah, and nobody here to give public comment.
Any others want to introduce themselves?
Sarah Butler, Operations and Policy Advisor.
Oh, sorry, Andrea Shealy, I'm the Executive Director,
Teresa Jacobs, Executive Assistant.
and we do have a guest here today. This is Emma Fan from the Office of Employee Office.
Thank you and happy to have you here with us. Next order of business will be approval of the minutes. That would be for January the 13th. It was distributed to all. Any comments, any changes?
None for me. That was good. None for me. I have to abstain from the vote because I was not in attendance.
The minutes are adopted as presented or emailed to everyone. Our next order of business will be
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Caesar, may I just mention, we have Joe Levan on our attending remotely for the city attorney's office.
Yes, I'm here.
Next order of business will be our guest speaker, Ms. Emma Fawn, Senior Ombudsman and Head of ADR. I'd like to know more about ADR, Office of Employee
Yeah, that's fine.
OED.
Ombudsman.
Hi, Emma. Yeah, not to be confused with OED or OEM.
All right.
I'm not actors of the city. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. When Andrea reached out to have us set this up, I think it's a great opportunity to make sure you all understand the work of our office, and especially if that for some reason would come into a grievance you were hearing or part of a grievance process that went before you, and it's helpful to kind of know who we are and how we work. And think about when and how our roles might intersect. So I'll just give you kind of my standard. Here's who we are, what we do. I sent you all those two materials that I sent you. The one pager is the first page in your packet. That is our basic. We send that to all staff who come to our office, and we give it to all staff who come to our office. Just to let them know that the parameters of our office, which I'll briefly go over. The FAQs document that I gave you, which is the next couple of pages, goes a little bit more into depth about some of the different parameters, some of the questions we would ask frequently. So, big things to know about our office: we're independent, informal, impartial, and confidential. So what that ends up meaning is we're a uniquely positioned city department. We are our sole department. That's the independence part. We report directly up to mayor and city council. And we have no other line and staff functions underneath our office. This is the core of our work. This is the majority of who we are and how we work. So we have no other pieces to that to interfere or to give us operational competing priorities. So the priority of our office is to try and resolve conflicts and raise concerns at lowest level. That's really where we spend our focus. So it's a very different world than the world of grievances and appeals to Civil Service Commission. But it does, I think you can see it can be part of the progression. So staff can come to us at any time in their trajectory as long as they are current staff. So we serve all 14,000 city employees, whether they're contract, temp, some of our TLT positions, doesn't matter. We serve all of them as long as they are current employees. limitations to our office's jurisdiction are before they enter our system, applicants, folks who are not yet city employees, and after they leave our system. So once they are terminated or separated from the organization, resign in some fashion, retire, etc., no longer within our jurisdiction. So as an informal entity, contrasting again to the work that you all do, our work is entirely in the range of conversation, dialogue, and again, that resolution at lowest level. So we have no formal enforcement authority. We have no ability to do investigations, intentionally so. And we are, crucially for our city staff, we are not mandatory reporters of workplace discrimination. So we fall outside of that mandatory reporting frame in those specific circumstances for the city, which means we are uniquely positioned like no other manager or HR professional or other city entity. We are uniquely positioned in that somebody can come to us and say, I'm being discriminated against, I'm being harassed, and we do not have an immediate obligation to report. I will say that does not mean we don't do anything. It just means we don't have an obligation to immediately report. We can work with people informally to look at options and stuff. So that informal aspect of our work takes a lot of different forms. It's conflict coaching. It's a lot of working people through what does respect look like? What does disrespect look like? Where are you struggling to communicate? It can look like bringing parties together, same conversations, same ideas. How do you communicate differently? How do you dialogue through things? How do you rebuild trust where trust has been broken? And so our group work can take the form of, kind of individual mediations, one party to one party, all the way up to some of our larger work with group facilitations, which can go anywhere from 5 people to 40 or 50 people. So it just depends on our sizing. Impartial, as I mentioned, we use the term impartial. Sometimes in our field, they'll use the term multi-partial, basically just meaning we're not an advocate for any one individual party who might come to our office with a concern. We try to empower them with options. We try and work with them on what they could do and how they could raise concerns most effectively to advocate for themselves, but we do not do that advocacy. Instead, we work again with all parties to try and help them advocate for their needs, get underneath their potential interests or positions to those needs, again, that are in alignments, and raise those most effectively. We try and work with them to strategize on how to do that. We also use the term impartial rather than neutral because we don't want to, in the city in particular, be neutral on things like race and social justice. We have an RSJ initiative that's been core to our city, and our office in no way wants to look at something where there's a racialized component, gender or identity component, and ignore that because we feel like we have to be neutral. So that's why we have adopted the term impartial rather than neutral. Confidentiality, as you can imagine, for our city staff, we're one of the few places that they can go, stop and pause and have a conversation and be assured that if they don't want that conversation to leave our office, it will not. The only times we have to go outside our office are if there is a PDR at play, if they email us or there's some other written communication that creates a public record, we may have to disclose that. Or if there's some other, litigation or some other subpoena, or some other legal proceeding where we would be legally obligated to disclose, or if there's input to self-attackers. So, and we strive in all of our records to maximize confidentiality. So a lot of the paragraph that you'll have on confidentiality and everything that we talk about, how do we maximize that? How do we ensure we're minimizing the creation of records in the first place so we don't have things we have to release? I think there's anything else. Those are just basic office parameters. Intake process, and we move pretty quickly. So we try and be back to staff. Our goal is to be in immediate contact with anybody who contacts our office within 2 business days. That doesn't necessarily mean we're getting them in the door in 2 business days, but we try and at least make that initial, hello, we've received your email, let's get you scheduled. And we're scheduling out at this point about 1 to 2 weeks. So we're able to move pretty fast. Our average time from start to finish on a case is about 2 months. So it varies quite a bit. Sometimes they close out in a week, sometimes in 6 months, but in general, we're staying in about a 2-month range. So we're moving pretty fast once we get people in to move them through their conflict and try and help them move that conflict forward to a more productive or constructive place. In terms of intersection, our office informal processes, the grievance process outlines it pretty clearly. At any point in the grievance process, staff can ask, at least the personnel's grievance process, staff can ask for a pause and come to our office. If you're familiar with the former ADR program here at the city, the ADR program was absorbed by our office by personnel law. And so same parameters of the work, same idea of the work, a little bit different structure. And if anybody wants, I can speak to that, but so when there's a formal process, people can choose to step out and opt for mediation or opt for a different dialogue as part of the grievance process. So in general, once people get to that grievance process, they do have a choice to continue to work with our office, or they continue on in that formal process, at which point we step back, as long as there's a formal process that they're actively engaged in and do not engage at the same time, because it's confusing and it doesn't create the best solutions. So either go through a formal process and see where that ends up, or come to our office and work to inform.
Good question.
Yeah,
So this commission actually, they don't hear grievances, they hear appeals after they've gone through the employee grievance process. So they can hear and work with people who either are in a union or not in a union. But one thing you're talking about, the grievance process is mentioned, the pause.
Mhm.
And that's something that I think maybe we want to think a little bit more about on the employee grievance process, perhaps, because we do require, or the rules require them to file with the Department of Human Resources within 20 days of a disciplinary action, a serious disciplinary action. So that might be that we have a little, suggestion to make in the personnel rules. And work with STHR on that. So I'm glad that we're bringing this up now. And then, would you mind, what are some of the, and not exact examples, but what are some examples that might come to your office?
Far and away, I'd say most of our issues are around communication. That's these a few forms. Performance evaluations, feedback between managers and employees tends to be a huge area of focus for our office. Staff who never received feedback from a manager suddenly getting a needs improvement on their performance evaluation and having concern about that. Coaching that came out of nowhere, that a staff member feels like, I had no idea this was an issue. Now I'm being presented with this coaching counseling. So that's a huge one. I would say for our managers, navigating those difficult conversations on the flip side. I've got a staff member who's not performing. They're leaving meetings abruptly. They're yelling at other staff. How do I work with them? What are the conversations I need to be having? How do I coach myself into those conversations? Well, that's a lot of our time. I'd say issues of trust, again, they tend to center on feedback. But things like, is my manager telling me about changes that are coming to my role, to the structure of our organization, to the work? Can I trust that when they tell me I'm doing great at the job that I actually am? Can I trust that the work that I'm doing, that I'm being told is really important, continues to be important and continues to be priority? We've got a lot of longstanding entrenched conflicts. We haven't spoken to each other in 10 years. Then they come to our office. So there's a lot of those that come in our door. Trying to think what we reported about in our annual report. It was performance evaluations and feedback were, I think, our top issue. And like I said, a lot of communication challenges, a lot of communication struggles. Right now, I would say we're dealing with a lot of escalated behaviors and how to deal with those. And we've been characterizing it as sort of an escalated disrespect in a way that I would say is relatively new for our office. We've always had instances of disrespect coming in our door. But now there are things, like I said, where somebody might leave a meeting, just leave a meeting entirely and not say anything, just hang up or walk out of the room. Or they might, again, raise voices, name calling, kind of discourteous language. We're seeing a lot of escalation of that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So one of the, that's very helpful.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
So one of the discussions we've been having in this body is how do we effectively, inform staff of their rights, or that, this is a resource that's available to them. And it occurs to me that the Ombudsman office is relatively new. I can't remember exactly when it was established.
2019.
Okay.
Yes, we are relatively
Yes.
by city.
My city years, yeah. And I remember, I'm familiar with ADR they used to report to me incidentally. And then also as a leader in the city, we referred people to ADR, but typically it's been employees. I heard you say managers are using that resource. So
Yes.
my question, I guess, is how are you reaching out? How do people know? How has it been that people have gained enough trust and respect that this is a real resource to know how many, and I'm sure this is all in your annual report, but like,
That's okay.
have you seen trending
Yeah.
numbers of
Oh,
more and more people taking advantage of this? And then
yeah.
how's that?
Yeah, we have. No, we've seen a growth pretty much every year our office has been in existence. Outreach has been a huge focus, as you can imagine. When the ADR program, so we came in 2019 and ADR really didn't phase out until 21. 22, you could check my math a little bit on that. So during the couple of years while both offices were in existence, it was a little difficult to differentiate. There are some key differences in services and how they're provided, but it was a little difficult to differentiate. So those years, I would say, we put our priority on word of mouth. We started just doing basic outreach presentations kind of all over the city, and really tried to just kind of ramp up and build relationships, starting with, I would say, our closest primary partners. So we spent a lot of time in our, whatever we're calling those meetings these days, but with civil service, ethics, our partners at OCR, any kind of HRIU, any kind of referral point, we felt like those were going to be the services we'd be most closely aligned with. So we spent some time there. That was our first few years. The last few years, we've established what we call our point of contacts. And so that came in, I think it was 21 or 2 where I started that. Each of our department heads is asked to provide a point of contact, their choice. We don't designate. They choose, sometimes it's a chief of staff, sometimes it's a department head of HR. Sometimes it's somebody else, a key advisor that they feel like they really want to have. And they're the person that we go to with anything we're kind of sharing around the department within bounds of confidentiality. And with any kind of concerns, but we built out that relationship. That made a huge difference to our referrals. Because we could run on an individual level with somebody in a key position. Again, kind of that HR director can be a huge resource for us because they'll hear and see a lot of things that could be referred our way. And they're in a really good position to do it. So we built out those relationships and that almost immediately we started to see really strong referral pathways from all of those folks. A lot of it's word of mouth. So we call them, we haven't got a technical term for them, but we kind of call them hotspots. We'll see one staff member and then the rest of the unit. We'll see a staff member and then 2 units over from them, somebody that they're close to, a work colleague they work with regularly. So we get a lot of that traffic as well. At this point, it's really about 50-50 between those 2 sources. A lot of HR directors and folks and managers who will call us when they're starting to hear something or see something, they're a little concerned. And then, like I said, just a lot of staff who just, as we started to be visible. The other thing I'd say that's built out our program, which I really haven't spoken to, which should, is our capacity building side. So everything that I just talked about with our office parameters is really in our case management, our individual casework. We also have a systemic mandate, which means that we're supposed to be looking, what at each of those individual cases, about 300 or so per year at this point. What do those tell us across the system about gaps in our system? That's why we do an annual report so we can report out on those trends. What are we seeing? What are the new things that we're seeing in cases? And what do they tell us about city systems, policy gaps, those kinds of things that maybe we would want? We've tried to build this. We do a lot of check-ins with our departments and our leadership and making sure that we're sharing those things out in a lot of different ways. But we also do our capacity building. So we built out a series, I think there's 7 trainings now that we offer regularly. And all of those are also, we invite, they're citywide, they're on cornerstones, we have a lot of traffic through those trainings. And we found a lot of people sit through, our bystander intervention training and suddenly they're thinking, shit, I'm really struggling with this coworker or with my manager or whoever else. We get a lot of referrals out of those pieces as well.
Their trainings are so good. They're so good.
Rachel and Caesar.
And I've heard some of them, I heard at least the bystander training being filed on KUOW a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, so Emma mentioned, but we have a what do we meet? Quarterly? Sarah is kind of helping run these meetings with Emma now. I call them the problem solvers because we all help employees who are in conflict try to resolve their conflict. So that involves the Civil Service Commission, Office of Employee Ombud, Human Resources Investigations Unit, Seattle Office for Civil Rights, Ethics and Elections. I might be naming all of those groups, but we get together. We try to, of course, refer, stay visible for each other, support each other, try to get employees to the right place when they're having conflict, let them know what their options are. And sometimes we have a project that we're working on together, and sometimes we don't. It's just a kind of community building support network. We have done some communications. The pandemic really interrupted a lot of the work that we were doing, and then changed how work is done. So, I think we still have some ideas to do some outreach to the coalition of city unions and other city unions together, just to raise the profile of all of the work that we're doing. But the Office of Employee Ombud, and especially Emma and the director, have just done such a great job over the past few years. I think one of the reasons that your department's work is growing so much is that you all are so trusted and so competent at what you do. Yeah, I think you're really making a difference for employees.
That means a lot.
So how many people are on your team?
We're a team of 6. So primarily divided. So I head up our case management side. I have a case manager under me. Then we have a capacity building side. There's 2 staff over there. Rachel heads that. And then Caesar is our training coordinator. We have our director and we have an office manager. Sorry, I'm just reading more into what we're now.
I know, when I said that's my question, I said, well, it's probably in
You
there.
don't have to read it. You really don't. It's not super long, but it's longer than a lot of people want. So.
I guess my other question, just because you said earlier when you're talking about that you absorbed ADR, but that the work is done approached differently. So there are, the standard kind of alternative dispute resolution principles.
Yes.
And I assume that those are still
None of those have changed.
play.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing you say is that there's a different.
Yeah, I can
approach.
speak
And you
to
don't
that
need
for
to
sure.
go
Yeah,
out of detail.
no, I don't have to. So the way the ADR program used to work is it was primarily, so the city was connected in what was called the interlocal group with the federal ombuds folks doing ombuds work in the federal government. What's that called? And then there was county government as well. And we were connected together into a network. And so everybody put in a group of staff who were interested from their particular area. So we had a group of federal employees, county, and city employees, and they were shared into this pool. And then they were all networked together. So when a case came to ADR, they referred it into the interlocal group, and it was then sent out to either a federal or a county mediator who would then take the case and move it through the mediation process. And that was what they did. It was primarily mediation. They did a little bit of group facilitation, but mostly that mediation process. Biggest difference is we do everything in-house. So you start with me in our office, and unless something happens to me, you are staying with me from the minute that I meet with you to the minute that you close your case. So you stay with the same person. I do a mediation. If there's a mediation, I take it to group facilitation. There's group facilitation, etc. Everyone on my team does the same thing. So it gives us a little bit more, I'd say, connection to the case and integration into city systems and understanding how city systems work. So that's the primary. Yeah. Hopefully that was succinct enough.
So just is the city not a part of that interlocal group anymore?
No. I have not heard to date because the county folks experienced a change in their ADR program as well. I know federal folks are experiencing a lot of changes right now. So in general,
They sure are. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
yeah. Those are kind of like, oh, wow, but we didn't want to maintain it in our office because of how we were doing work to create up the mediators and participate.
Does your office have the capacity that it needs, or you think does the need exceeds?
What we're seeing in our case numbers is they're starting to level off. So when we first started, we had a team of 4 in our office, was at a growth of about between about 150 to 200 cases. Every time we have added cases. So if the city wants to continue addressing things and building out that capacity, we will see a growth in cases. We'll see a growth in the group facilitation work we can do, growth in the trainings that we can provide. I would say at this point, we're managing and we're gonna, that 1 to 2 week timeline that I was talking about for case intakes, that's gonna start to get pushed at some point. So it's, it's that continual, like, do we take the capacity, we build it out as much as we can. And we accept that there will be a threshold where we have to say, we can't take on this group facilitation work for your department. You're gonna have to go.
Yeah.
Consultants, and you're gonna have to pay the consultants to do it because we can't take on. So stuff like that, I think we're more limited, and I think we could build out and could have even larger capacity if case of the folks to do it. So, yeah. Chicken egg question.
I have a question, Emma.
Yeah,
Your annual report,
yes.
is that accessible to any person?
Yes, it is. It is posted, I believe, both internally and externally, definitely on our internal SharePoint. And then it's posted externally as well on our website. So, and we have shortened it. It used to be a lot longer, but each year we tried to kind of really distill down the things that we want staff to know and our city folks to know the work that we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we're seeing in the cases. Yeah. I'm happy to send you all. I'll make sure I can send it to Andrea or to Teresa. I can send you a copy of the report. We're just finalizing it now. So it should be on the next few days.
Any more questions, Emma?
Are there any other metrics that you tie your work to? Like, I know that this originally came out of the interdepartmental team that was put together in 2018, which I was on, and it was really incredible to be a part of that. But it was like, I think the final straw anyway that pushed the development of that team was a lot of lawsuits, discrimination lawsuits filed against Seattle City. Like, yeah. So is there any metric like that? I mean, I asked you that question knowing that that's impossible to answer, but does your department look at that?
I think, yes. I mean, I think we could probably tell you that any given year we have prevented lawsuits for the city.
Yes.
And like 1 to 2 lawsuits would probably pay for the operating cost of our office by the time we're successfully able to win. So we don't have a direct tie-in to say we prevented this lawsuit and that lawsuit, or we could have prevented this lawsuit and not cost that much money. So those externals are harder to, I would say, to provide concrete numbers for and actually justify.
Yeah.
We work mostly with internal. So we ask people what resolution they would like in the case, and we try and figure out how close did we get them to that resolution, all the way, most of the way, not. So those numbers always appear in our report. We look at how did we intervene? Are they okay with us openly? That number has changed quite a bit. When we first started, a lot more people did not want our office connected in any way with their case. They didn't want us using their name at all. They didn't want anybody to ever know they'd come to us. And that was, to your point about building trust and relationship, because we didn't have the trust and relationships. I don't want anybody to know I'm working with people. Fast forward 6 years, we're now at a point where, yes, I want people to know we're working with you. That number has shifted. Where now a lot more people want to be visibly seen coming to our office, visibly seen to be working with us. Different challenges with that, but it's a different metric as well, I'd say, to watch. Trying to think there's a third metric I was going to mention. We measure office traffic, we measure resolution rates, and we measure the kind of action that we took. So we try and monitor, is it back channel diplomacy and not being openly mediating, openly facilitating, kind of working behind the scenes to say, hey, how's this going? How's this manager? Can we get some support over here for this person, even if we never mentioned who we talked to? Versus, mediation facilitation. We watch those numbers every year as well. Yeah, the hard part about saying, can we actively tie the work that we did with preventing a lawsuit? Yes, but we also can't give any of those numbers.
Yeah, it's all potential. Yes, and I know exactly the answer to that too, because one of the ways we point out the success of the Public Safety Civil Service Commission is that, look, we weren't sued like all these other cities were because our practices are best practices and really successful and people are satisfied. Yeah.
Again, I will say too, we have industry standards that we follow, our International Ombudsman Association standard and our United States Ombudsman Association standard. So we look to both as well to better work. Not coming up with those on our own.
Yes, the public service employees also covered under
Everyone. Yeah.
everybody. Oh,
Yes, yeah, yes, police and firefighters are.
the other one. Well, thank you, Ms. Baum, for presentation. I must confess that I did use that group once and they gave me good advice
Oh,
and my issue was resolved.
oh, good. So glad.
It was time. Yeah, so they gave me really good advice. So I have used it. You had posted about 2 or 3 years ago. Posted all over the floor and I said, let me give this a try. And but it did work out. I spoke with one of the folks now on everything, but
Great.
they helped me to navigate. The questions.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, yeah, we meet with Emma and her team pretty regularly. Please let us know. I know we've talked enough, but like any other ways that you think of that our offices can work together to help employees have a better experience being employees, less conflict. We always want to do that.
Well, I'm not shy to call.
But that,
Is it not shy to call when I have questions?
oh, good, yeah, no,
And
don't
we
be.
know the meetings where we talk and share information, what data we're gathering, what we're seeing, the challenges. I think those are important too, so making sure that we take the information of us.
Yeah, we appreciate, yeah, we help each other. Thanks. Well, you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to take off. You got other work you gotta do.
We do, but thank you so much for. Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon, Emma.
Hey, next order of business is the report from Executive Shelley.
Yes. Oh, wow. I just closed this computer that had my report on. Let's do that. Okay, the budget update, the materials in your packet unfortunately are the same ones that I sent last month because the new budget to actual report has not been posted yet. So when we get that, we will send it around, but I would expect it would say that our spending is well within reason. You'll notice that I'm not putting 24. I'm not putting last year, as I have been in previous years up against 2025, because our budget is so different in 2025. We added 7 positions and additional, non-labor costs. So I just didn't think it would be super helpful to give you 2024 costs, but if anyone would like that, please let me know. And I can, I can add it back in. As for our departmental work, we're really heavy on the promotional exams right now. I won't report on all of them, but Friday and Saturday were both promotional exams for the fire and police department. So we're spending a great deal of work on that. Our reorganization is essentially done, complete. We are really I am really happy with the outcome. It feels right to have the public safety civil service testing team in our department, in our space, working together, collaborating on all these different projects, bodies of work. We are putting together our 2025 work plan with different milestones. One thing that we have in store for you all this year is that we're putting together a series of trainings, probably to do over the late spring and early summer. Mary, you've experienced some of these before, but we're going to do one on the pre-hearing process, one on hearing cases, and one on the post-hearing process. So developing a decision, writing a decision. This is also news to Jen. We're putting these together, but we'll incorporate you and your advice into some of these trainings, Joe. But that's just a preview for things that we're hoping to do later on this year. I really want to thank you, even though Miss Fan has left, having her here is wonderful. We do get together periodically with the other problem solvers in the city of Seattle. If there's anyone or any group that you all would like to hear from, that you'd like to have come to one of your meetings and ask them anything you want, please let us know and we'll try to invite them. But we're hoping to have some more guest speakers this year. Sarah, do you have anybody that you want to give them a preview to, or is nothing firm enough to say quite yet?
Nothing.
Okay, well, we'll just leave you in suspense about who else we're gonna hear from this year.
I have a question, maybe,
Yeah,
just related to the presentation we just had. You asked her a question about the referrals or how the requirements that people have before they come here
Mhm.
and what we say to people. And I want to make sure I'm tracking comment. So are you envisioning some shift to those rules that you said encouraging people to take a pause and go to,
I want employees to know about all of the resources that are available to them. And what she told us, and we prepped with her ahead of this, and she mentioned it at that time, was that all of the collective bargaining agreements in the city allow, and I'm not sure where, I haven't looked at this language yet, but where in the collective bargaining and grievance process, they can essentially pause the clock.
oh, okay, the clock.
So
So
that
they had
was
to do,
Yeah, yeah, so I don't know what it would look like or whether it's a possibility, but we don't have a reciprocal piece in the personnel rule that goes to the employee grievance process that is for people pursuing this civil service pathway. But if it is appropriate, you know, both to like match that, so employees' expectations are the same for both processes, but also to encourage parties to resolve their own matters if they can at the lowest level. Maybe we want to look into that.
thanks. I just wasn't, you said pause and I wasn't sure what, but sure, makes sense. Pausing the clock.
Pausing the clock.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what I mean.
Thank you.
Teresa or Sarah, do you all have, oh, Sarah, you have an update for these commissioners.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about a slide that was adopted as part of the budget last year. And just for your visibility, there's no action being taken at this time.
We don't have a slide.
Yes.
I understand.
Some backstory.
We're painfully familiar.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
I didn't know.
Okay, so a
Statement
slide is a statement of legislative intent. As I understand, it's a way for council to engage in a discussion with departments about a policy or budget issue. Last year, when the budget was adopted, they were anticipating more employee layoffs, and council wanted to understand how they can improve processes of the city to support employees. So they adopted slide CBO-002S-A, which asked CBO and SDHR to collaborate on identifying opportunities to support employees that are subject to layoff. We're all supportive. And it asked SDHR and CBO to consider many things, but one of the things it asked them to look at was to expand the reinstatement list to include civil service exempt employees. And that gives me a little bit of a pause because it is there's a provision in the city charter that says that you need to compete openly for your initial appointment to the civil service system at the city of Seattle. And so I'd like to understand kind of more where that is.
Which is different than.
Yes, I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so with, so Sarah, STHR has been asked to consider whether or not there should be a change that would be related to reinstatement, which is a process.
It's a right.
It's a right for civil service employees,
Right.
but it's not a right for exempt employees.
And exempt employees is more like appointees or?
Appointees or at will employees like assistant city attorneys, and just for instance, most
And they don't require a selection process.
Okay. And so they want to be able to be reinstated at a certain orderly fashion.
Well, the current rules is you have a right to return. So if there's a vacancy, then you are just simply reinstated. Right, and council is asking to consider a change where exempt employees would also be reinstated. So there's just a lot of things to.
So it's still early times where the city council has just asked STHR to what exactly?
Consider
to give more
going forward with recommendations, and
When's the?
that is due June 2nd of this year. And
So they didn't ask the Civil Service Commission, but we're gonna work with STHR to help them develop their response, and they've agreed to work with us on that.
keep you updated.
You still have the floor.
Yes, I'll move on to the case status report, which is at page 9. Thank you for putting this packet together, Teresa. All right. So there are 2 matters filed with the Civil Service Commission right now. Actually, there is one. There is a new appeal since the last time we met, and that is Seattle Parks employee Baraka Brown versus Seattle Parks and Rec. Their appeal was a suspension, and their appeal was filed timely, and a suspension is within the jurisdiction of the Civil Service Commission. So we will schedule a pre-hearing conference with Mr. Brown and his representative, as well as Seattle Parks and Rec, and go through the preliminary discussions, identifying the issues on appeal, identifying a preliminary witness and exhibit list, which we ask them to do that work up front before they get there and submit these materials to us. I preside over all the pre-hearing processes for the Civil Service Commission. And so we will go all the way up to hearing. After the pre-hearing conference, Teresa, will reach out to you all. We will find out the number of days probably that the parties will need, and then Teresa will reach out to you all, find out what your availability is in the range that we're talking about. We of course have to be available, and you have to be available, and then we go to the parties and make sure that they are available as well. And we will schedule the hearing for the number of days that we want. We will make sure it suits your schedule. And they're entitled to a timely hearing though, so we don't want to go too far out. But I look forward to that.
Do you envision doing those trainings? Obviously within the time
Yes.
frame, will all these things work together?
Yeah, it usually takes us, 4, 5, 6 months to get
Yeah,
to
to
the
get
point where we're hearing a case. So I think we'll have plenty of time. I'm thinking 1 topic per meeting. And we'll be well prepared to help y'all hear that case. We will also, Joe Levan is the other person that we will be working with on his schedule to support you all with legal advice throughout the hearing and post-hearing processes.
In between that time, that could be also referred to the hearing officer, right?
It could. You all do have the ability to refer a matter to the hearing examiner. In my experience, the commission does like to hear its own cases and decide its own cases. So if that's something that you all want to consider, you would want to discuss that probably earlier rather than later. Is that something?
No, I just thought that is there intermediate area where it doesn't come to us, but it can go. Because we've done it once before.
We did it before because we didn't have
The
a
time.
full complement of
Right.
commissioners. And so now that we are fully seated,
Mhm.
it's appropriate to readdress that question. We have a appeal that has been filed and is moving that direction.
Well, we have-
Then we should probably sit to have that discussion.
Yeah.
And we don't have to make the decision, as I understand it, to all or nothing. Like it could be case by case, depending upon
That's correct.
our
Another
availability and issues and whatever else.
That's exactly right. It could be for a number of reasons. And so I guess what I would suggest is, why don't I go ahead and conduct the pre-hearing conference and get a list of the preliminary witness list from both parties. I know that I don't think any of you have worked at parks. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or have close relationships with at least the identified appellant is named Baraka Brown. Why don't I get those witness lists and then I'll speak with each of you, make sure that you can't identify any conflicts of interest that you have related to these cases, because that's another reason why the commission might want to consider delegating to the Office of Hearing Examiner. But I hope that you all will be able to hear this disciplinary appeal.
And as I read section 503, we have 20 days, I think. We have 20 days from this point, from the time that the preliminary's been completed, they do qualify for the appeal. And 20 days after.
I'm not sure what that rule says because I don't have it up in front of me. May I take a look at your rule?
Looking at appeals, 5.03, highlighted in black, 20 days.
20 days for them to.
Decisions by the executive director may be appealed to the commission within 20 calendar days after the date of the order. So the employee was 20 days. So if I were to determine that the appeal had been untimely, premature, or not within your jurisdiction, and I dismissed it, they would have 20 days from the date of my dismissal to
Okay.
appeal. Oh, sorry,
Um,
that decision, but I didn't do that.
Okay, so that's not about.
That's right.
Excellent.
Mr. Brown's appeal will proceed before the commission in one, either before you all or before the office of hearing examiner, unless there's some reason why, he withdraws it or settles it or something like that.
So I was reading through this and it's kind of confusing because there's a Miss Brown
Yes.
and a Mr. Brown
There
and a Miss
is.
Brown.
There are
They're not
two
related,
people with the
they're
last
just-
name Brown,
They're not,
not to my knowledge, but we can clarify that.
okay, because as you're reading through, it's like, okay, Miss Brown, Mr. Brown. Yeah, did you read that? Excuse me.
Person, yes.
And, no, I was making sure it's not a typo.
No, you're right. There's an HR employee name with the last name Brown and there's the appellate last name Brown, and they do both work for Parks, but I'll check with them. I'll check with him at the pre-hearing conference and make sure he's not related to Miss Brown. But even if he were, all we would need to know is that.
This Brown is just accusing the other Brown of not, of hiding evidence or
Yeah,
tampering with evidence.
yeah, yeah. And for now, you all don't need to please don't do any, research or any
No.
additional reading. You don't need to do anything at this point. I'm just notifying you of this appeal. I will proceed on the pre-hearing parts of the appeal. We'll do a couple of trainings to prepare you to hear the case. And all of the evidence will be presented to you through our office. We've already cautioned, and we always caution parties not to have ex-party contact. So if any party or witness related to this case reaches out to you and wants to discuss it, please do not discuss it with them. I don't expect that to happen, but, and if you have any questions about the case, you can always feel free to contact me. We'll be happy, or Joe, if you are seeking legal advice.
But we'll get a witness list and all of that, so, and I have found that sometimes that's where.
You might identify it there. Yeah, yeah, and I'll get that to you shortly after we conduct the pre-hearing conference, which I think we can probably accomplish in the next few weeks. I can't guarantee it'll be before our next meeting, but, we don't have any reason to dilly-dally about it, so we'll go ahead and schedule it.
And I guess we'll probably learn this in the trainings, but just because we know someone, does that mean we necessarily have a conflict of interest or?
It doesn't necessarily mean that,
So,
no.
okay.
And, if you have any specific questions, Joe and I are available to schedule time with, but, if you generally a conflict of interest can arise, or even the appearance of a conflict of interest can arise, if you have some kind of certainly if you have firsthand knowledge of the facts in a case. But if you have a close relationship with the party, and if you have any relationship with the party, it is a good idea and recommended to just disclose it. Certainly let me know. We can discuss it with Joe to determine whether or not that's something that, needs to be addressed, but certainly get all your questions answered. We've had situations with, while Commissioner Weidman Williams has been on the commission where, since you all worked or are currently working for the city of Seattle, people involved in some of these appeals. And you might just say, I worked with this person 6 years ago. I received a Christmas card from them. But it is, as long as you disclose that and then let the parties, all the parties know about it, they have the opportunity to say whether that they think that's it would be inappropriate or difficult for you to hear the case, we can have that discussion, but we all are here by virtue of having some connection to the city of Seattle, so it's not uncommon for a commissioner to know someone involved in a case.
And if you look at your rules, if you look under 2.02 is the rule that deals with conflicts of interest and disqualification. So there's a whole process for that. Most importantly, to reiterate what Andrea said, is that if you do look to see in this particular proceeding who the parties are, and if you receive any kind of communication with them, then do not communicate with them about this case. And then if you so happen to have done that, then you would need to disclose it on the record. But that's, for now, that's the most important thing to think about.
Yeah, and maybe we can build in a little bit of training too, to this series about conflicts of interest and the appearance of potential conflicts of interest. Right. So that is Brown v. Seattle Parks and Rec. The next matter is Reichenbach v. Seattle Public Utilities. And we've actually received an update on this case since this case status report was sent to you. And that is that the case has actually been dismissed. Ms. Reichenbach requested to withdraw their appeal. And on March 3rd, the hearing examiner did dismiss the appeal. So that matter will come off of the active cases part of your case status report, and it is resolved. All right. I think that is the last bit of my case status report.
Well, thank you, Director Shelley, for that information. Next part of business. Page. Is there any new business?
I don't think so. Wanted to let commissioners know that as soon as I receive from Ethics and Elections the financial interest statements, I will forward those to you.
That's usually due in April,
Yeah,
right?
tax day. So
I think it'll be all
15th,
electronically
April
now,
15th.
don't they? Electronically now, isn't it?
It is electronic.
And did you see that to all the commissioners?
I will send it.
Oh, you have to message it.
Yes, Ethics and Elections hasn't sent out the boards of information
Okay.
form yet.
I was wondering about missed something.
Yes. You may, I don't know if you will receive anything as an employee, but I say that if you do receive one as an employee, if you fall within the parameters of it, that you still fill out one as an employee.
Okay.
And then you'll get the boards and commission.
Okay, well, hearing no other business. We're good in the order, is there anything? Our next meeting is going to be April 21st. April 21st. Okay,
Oh, do you want to mention about the open house?
We are planning an open house for the commission, since we did have our reorg, and we do have an additional suite 1640 for our exams unit, but we're gonna have a open house. We do have it tentatively scheduled in May. And we will send out information to, an invitation to commissioners from both Public Safety and Civil Service Commission to come and join us for refreshments and get a look at our new office setup, and just to get an opportunity for everyone to just kind of mingle.
okay, is there a motion for adjournment?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion has been made to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to adjourn, second has been heard. Any questions?
Nope.
Hearing none, I guess this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Take the time, please.
Oh, the time is now.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Joe. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Thank you.